Every civilization has struggled for freedom in fiction and in the waking world. Whether it's Attack on Titan or the United States telling Great Britain to get bent, liberty is universally sought. Yet I'd wager only a small percentage of people have a readily available definition for freedom. Like Lincoln said, "We all declare for liberty, but in using the same word, we do not all mean the same thing." What I'm interested in is how Hajime Isayama defines freedom, employing Attack on Titan. I don't actually read the manga, so there won't be any manga spoilers, but there will be spoilers up to the end of Season 3 of the anime, so Season 4 slackers are in the clear. I digress, this is still very much a Season 4 video. If you're caught up, you'll very easily connect the dots. And one more thing, I'm using the dub in this video because the rest of the video's in English. If you're a sub-elitist and gatekeeping gets you that bricked up, just Yamate Kodasai. Zimako Nasi. Let's dust off an oldie and dissect Attack on Titan's pilot episode with this idea of freedom at the hull. After our flash forward, an indicator that Isayama's gonna rip out our hearts and string them into little necklaces, our protagonist Eren wakes up in a field, littered with campanula flowers, also widely known as bellflowers. These are significant, but I'll get to that in a minute. Isayama uses a common but relevant insertion for the opening here: the slow onset of shadows. You see this done in Breaking Bad, No Country for Old Men, A Clockwork Orange, and other great pieces of cinema. The use of this symbol is pretty on the nose. We're told off the bat that darkness is coming. A darkness in the world and a darkness within our protagonist. Later in the episode, after Eren spurgs out on Hannes, we're shown a bell. The bell has always, in political ideology and classic literature, been a fairly obvious symbol for freedom. In Philadelphia is the Liberty Bell, and across the world in Berlin, Germany is the Freedom Bell. The majority of Attack on Titan's geography and culture is based on Old Germany. I'm sure you're seeing some similarities here. The bell in parody is used to indicate the return of our scouts, but more esoterically, it's a symbol that says, "Here is freedom." And freedom is fundamentally good, right? Freedom should be sought and fought for, right?
The day was lost! We have nothing! Your son died.
This is life without walls. This is life not tethered to the neat order and submission of civilization. And as we know, this is what Eren called freedom.
It's more grown up to settle for living in fear behind some stupid wall your whole pointless life?
It's pretty clear Isayama claims that freedom may not be what we think it is. Just like Brian McGee, the British philosopher who once explained the Freudian perspective. We often hear it asserted that most people do not really want freedom, because freedom involves responsibility, and most people are frightened of responsibility. And the responsibility of our mortality, that cold bronze bell, is a burden seldom approached when behind the convenience of a wall. Listen to the soundtrack when Eren's swallowed and has to face the true nature of his desires, that life without walls that he wanted so badly. Eren's idea of freedom sent him to the belly of the whale, a climactic moment the hero of the story will have to shed their old skin and be birthed anew to escape fatal imprisonment. And this all started with the ring of a bell. Let's backtrack a second. Bellflowers. Isayama uses the symbol of the bell so frequently, it wouldn't be rash to say that the main idea of Attack on Titan, above all other theme and moral, is our relationship to freedom. These flowers are hidden away in the shadows, away from Eren, and that's where freedom lives. Freedom is not in the light, but in darkness. Or, like Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, says, "The gold is in the dark." One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To know this translates to freedom. This leads us to our first definition. Let's slap on our first definition of freedom in accordance with Isayama's allegory. Freedom is disillusionment. It is the darkness of a harsh truth balancing out the blinding light of our delusions. There's a spoiler-free piece of manga dialogue that reinforces this idea. There's nothing further removed from freedom than ignorance. There's an issue that comes with the truth, though. It's really, really scary. The kind of scary you write an entire animated post-apocalyptic series about. But as Aristotle reminds us, he who has overcome his fears will truly be free. Or like Isayama claims through Hanji,
knowledge is always worth the risk. I believe that.
What is this horrifying truth Isayama is talking about then? I think this is an appropriate time to get a pretty big idea out of the way. I discussed this in my previous video, which is linked above, but for those who can't reach the button, I'll summarize. It's important for the sake of this discussion that any theme or idea introduced here doesn't get relegated to only the universe of Attack on Titan. Animated characters are the human beings you're surrounded by every day. These themes are universal. They're embedded in our DNA. Like the lead adaptive writer of the Funimation series said, Attack on Titan can be approached as an allegory.
Between what is out there, that is to say, beyond the walls that we erect in our daily life, and what is in here, that is to say, what we keep hidden, what we keep protected behind those walls, there has to be some level, however slight, of communication between the two. Otherwise, what is out there eventually turns into this kind of unfathomable wilderness that cannot be navigated or negotiated with. But that's often the case in our lives, at least on a psychological level.
Our fears and the parts of us which we've casted outside our own proverbial walls are highlighted by Isayama's work. That's the chief function of Attack on Titan. We may relate to Eren in that we struggle to explain it or communicate it or even identify it, but we don't do well behind walls, no matter what anybody tells you. It's, of all people, actually, Pope Benedict that said, "We were not created for an easy life." Or it's like Freud said, the more civilization, the more repression. We're not psychologically wired for the life which our culture demands of us. It's like what Erich Fromm claimed. Many psychiatrists and psychologists refuse to entertain the idea that society as a whole may be lacking in sanity. They hold that the problem of mental health in a society is only that of the number of unadjusted individuals, and not of a possible unadjustment of the culture itself. Showcased in Eren, there is a tinge of spite that we all subconsciously hold against the world as a result. Isayama implores us in 23-minute increments to not pretend otherwise. Culture, however, our walls tell us to ignore it, and nowhere in that request are we geared for facing what lies beyond the walls, or the facets of us that the walls do not accept. And like Michael Tatum explains, there are consequences to that. Eren is the resentful part of us which has been buried by civilization, simply disguised as a cartoon character. I know that's a huge claim to make, so before I'm called out for being a Blue Curtains Mean Depression asshole, Isayama, creator of the series Isayama, touched on this idea when asked which character he sees in himself.
最初アルミンかなと思ってたんですけど、最初はやっぱりエレンだったな。最初は全くその物語のためのこういう性格というつもりで書いてたんですけど、実はそのあまり見たくなかった自分の内面だったのかなっていう感想をしてきましたね。
Isayama further confirmed this in the final Attack on Titan guidebook, saying, "After all, a character is something inside of you." So, back to the question. Through the symbol of Eren, we're shown a horrifying truth embedded in our nature, cleverly disguised as conflict in a cartoon. What is it that Isayama digs up from the basement? The ultimate revelation within Attack on Titan is the epiphany that humans and Titans are the same beings. Not just relegated to the story that Titans are transformed aliens, but that Eren and the Smiling Titan are in many ways the same character. That Erwin, in all his nobility, is the same character as this thing. Titans are a symbol for everything within us that is repressed and cast away by both ourselves and our culture. We put up walls to keep out the parts of us that we don't want to properly tend to. Doesn't seem to be working out too well for Paradis, does it? As much as Eren is a symbol, Titans are symbols as well. It's a fact shown in history time and time again that human beings, the ones that you love and interact with, are evil. We see this in 1940s Germany referenced throughout the series, that perfectly normal people, the people joking and socializing in bars, were the same people who we read about in history books described as demons. And this was not a freak, one-off accident. If it happened then, it can happen now. No matter who you are, you carry evil. And this inherent evil is embodied in the symbol of the Titan. It's what Jung called the shadow, what Christians called Satan, and it's what Isayama called a Titan. It's like Jung asks, how can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? Or in the words of Flock,
If we want to stand any chance against the Titans, we need a devil!
because I respect empirical evidence over mindless theory, one point of reference here. Paul Maclean, an American neuroscientist, deduced that a part of the human brain is reptilian, aptly named the reptile brain. It's the part of our neurology that drives aggression, dominance, and territoriality. These faculties are sewn to us, no matter how much our civilization and society try de-threading them, and Titans are an apt symbol for this. Titans are reptilian in nature.
As a matter of fact, they'll probably just grow back, lizard style. Creepy little bastard.
The reptile brain on a neurological level houses our darkness, and it's located at the base of our brainstem, running down into the spinal cord. Interesting then, that that's right where a Titan needs to be struck to be conquered. Titans are kind of a reverse reflection of humans. They're all animal, all primal, all reptile, except for the human at the nape. The Dark Mirror in mythology has never shown us what isn't already there. This arrangement is an obvious yin and yang, which ultimately proves my point. Eren and the Smiling Titan are the same character. Levi and the Beast Titan are the same character. As above, so below. Again, Jung explains this in one of his early works called The Psychology of the Unconscious. Too much of the animal disfigures the civilized human being. Too much culture makes a sick animal. Acknowledging this very present animal capacity is no easy task. It's no easy task to slay a Titan. Like the writer of Wicked, Gregory Maguire, says, people who claim that they're evil are usually no worse than the rest of us.
I'm the bad guy.
We are the Walking Dead. We all go a little mad sometimes.
Everybody's a suspect!
I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot, and you think that of me? No. I am the one who knocks.
Because we are the origin of all coming evil.
This truth must manifest upwards from the depths in one way or another, which is why Isayama wrote that Grisha Jaeger hid the books, the horror of knowledge, in the basement, down below. The greatest knowledge, hence the greatest freedom, comes from unlocking that dark cellar door, storing all of the things about us and about the world that we cannot face. After the climactic approach to our shadows, Isayama shows us that there is a freedom that follows, similar to Jung's claim that if you comprehend the darkness, it comes over you like the night with black shadows and countless shimmering stars. Only he who does not comprehend the darkness fears the night. Again, I value evidence in the literature much more than I do grasping at straws and brooding over this stuff, so here's more proof. Isayama very carefully, very delicately tells us that this is freedom.
This is freedom!
Knowledge is liberation. However, there's an obvious difference between this freedom and freedom in practice, so let's add on to our definition. Freedom is also action despite consequence. Liberation, as Isayama defines, does not consider outcome. There's this repeating instance within Attack on Titan that often goes overlooked, but is so important to effectively digesting the story. Tell me if you see a pattern here.
And I'll be damned if I'm going to miss it. Being there, is that important? More than humanity's victory? Yes.
I don't care about killing all the Titans, and I don't care about freeing mankind either! I say let them get wiped out by Titans! And if that makes me an enemy of humanity, so be it! I don't care if I'm the worst girl who's ever lived!
You agree to take Krista with us today, right now, or so help me, I will throw your whole plan out of whack!
Are you completely insane? That doesn't help her! I thought that you genuinely cared!
If it robs her of a future, then life's a bitch. I've made my peace with what that says about me.
This introduces the paradox of freedom, the dark mirror image of liberty. No different than our own shadows, illustrated by Titans, freedom carries a shadow side. One person's freedom is another slavery. American author Mark Twain wrote a short story about it called The War Prayer, which includes the missive, "Is it one prayer? No, it is two. One uttered, the other not. Keep it in mind. If you would beseech a blessing upon yourself, beware, lest without intent you invoke a curse upon a neighbor at the same time." Mikasa takes notice to this, examining a praying mantis eating a moth. Freedom oftentimes comes with a price tag marked selfishness. There's the oxymoron, a kind of selfless selfishness. As Historia frees herself of her familial bond, her father is faced with mildly inconvenient consequences. Had Eren been selfish enough to betray the Scout's orders, Petra wouldn't have been faced with mildly inconvenient consequences. What if Erwin wasn't selfish enough to go out on that mission despite being unfit, and develop a plan to get Eren back safely? And of course, one has to wonder what the consequences of King Fritz not renouncing war for several fleeting years of peace would have been. Another example, Ymir selfishly manipulates Historia to some degree, but it results in the first instance of unconditional love Ymir ever experiences, so liberating, in fact, that she's okay with the idea of her own demise. Counterintuitive, isn't it? It's a simple matter of substance versus form. Substance being the words of others, the ideas and reason of others' experiences versus one's own ether, one's own experiences, and personally struggled for insights. It's like reading the Bible versus undergoing an actual crucifixion, an actual rebirthing phenomenon. In the old fables and the classic tales, we always see selfishness as a hubris or a downfall. Isayama says, no. He shows us instead that selfishness is not productive or destructive until there is outcome, like he explains through Levi.
Do as your conscience dictates. At the end of the day, there's no reason to go against how you see it. The choice is yours. Either way, there's no guarantee. In the end, you choose what you choose. If afterwards your regrets are at a minimum, good for you.
Substance versus form. Participating in this decision is by all means freedom in all of its liberating glory and destructive selfishness. And to my season 4 guys, holy shit!
Sucks, don't it? The moment you realize you don't know shit.
Knowledge is liberation. Selfishness, even, liberation. Throughout the first 2 seasons of Attack on Titan, we come to find this over and over again. Until we don't. In Season 3, we're treated to a pivotal scene involving Levi and Kenny, where Isayama has some troubling news for us. As Kenny dies, finally faced with mortality, he has an earth-shattering epiphany.
We humans, we're all the same. Every last one of us. For some, it's drinking. For some, it's women. For some, even religion. Family, the king, dreams, children, power. All of us had to spend our lives drunk on something, else we'd have no cause to keep pushing on. Everyone was a slave to something.
If freedom is the dream, if freedom is knowledge or selfishness, how could those truly be if we've shackled ourselves to those very things? That's the painful paradox that Isayama guides us towards, even if it's our intellectualizations of ownership, the stuff you've been listening to me rattle on about for the past 20 minutes. We're all owned by something. As Kenny reminds us, freedom of one paradigm just submits us to another. As Historia freed herself of her familial ties, she became a slave to a new government.
Am I acting for myself? Or am I still just someone's tool?
As Mikasa frees herself of inaction, she in some ways becomes a slave to her genetic instincts. As Grisha frees the founding titan of its inaction, a family is faced with death. And as Levi frees the civilians of parody from Titans, he himself falls a slave to
heroics.
This is where the tragedy of Eren Yeager lies. Like a character in Season 4 says, "You're a slave too, and your master's a worthless bastard." Throughout the third season, Isayama concludes that something must own us. Something has to fill that vacancy, and it's because, like what the American anthropologist Ernest Becker deduced in his book, The Denial of Death, the real world is simply too terrible to admit. It tells man that he is a small, trembling animal who will someday decay and die. We as humans are paradoxes. Our very existence is a paradox. We're stuck half animal, half symbolic, half a primal interface, half more than it. Man is food for worms. This is the paradox. He is out of nature and hopelessly in it. This contradictory nature of existence, living just to one day die, sends mankind into a subconscious, desperate grope for illusions. For some, it's drinking. For some, it's women. Some, even religion. Kenny's list isn't extensive. He is, however, suggesting that your passions, your meaning, are all your own clever self-deception, blinding you from the fact that someday you will be rigid and cold. Modern man is drinking and drugging himself out of awareness. Everything that man does in his symbolic world is an attempt to deny and overcome death. He literally drives himself into a blind obliviousness with social games, psychological tricks, personal preoccupations so far removed from the reality of his situation that they are forms of madness. Agreed madness, shared madness, disguised and dignified madness, but madness all the same. There is a reason that this epiphany comes at Kenny's final minutes. Death, then, becomes in a way an answer to life. The key to one's shackles usually erect new prisons, new bars, but bars all the same. Harrowing to suggest that everything we do, everything we love is just a neurotic means to escape the chilling reality of our eventual grotesque demise.
All of us had to spend our lives drunk on something. Else we'd have no cause to keep pushing on.
Like the German psychologist Erich Fromm asked, can freedom become a burden too heavy for man to bear, something he tries to escape from? Is there not also, perhaps, besides an innate desire for freedom, an instinctive wish for submission? We are romantically drunk on the culture or on the counterculture, on the music or on the silence. Take your pick, just like Eren did. To look down upon someone else's slavery is to forego the terrifying realization that you, yourself, are shackled. Notice that Eren's so passionately driven, so intensely infuriated by the shackles he sees on other people. It's almost like he sees a part of himself in these people, a part of himself almost no man has the courage to face, his own shadow cast upon the sheep he criticizes. Hermann Hesse, the German-Swiss poet, tells us as much. What isn't part of ourselves doesn't disturb us. Eren's irrational vibrance when looking upon others in shackles indicates that Eren Yeager bears the heaviest shackles of any character in Attack on Titan. It wouldn't be irrational to deduce at this point that in a show about defining and then attaining freedom, freedom cannot be defined, nor can it be obtained. Nothing can free us from the imminent reality that the hearts beating in our chests are going to cease. I'm sure by this point you're thinking, nihilism. However, I'd strongly disagree. Like Attack on Titan shows us time and time again, one must undergo loss. A loss of self and a loss of confidence. A loss of dreams, one's illusions, and a life's worth of betrayal. Because like Chuck Palahniuk says in Fight Club, it's only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything.
There are places in the world that aren't made out of stone, that there's something inside that they can't get to, that they can't touch. It's yours.
I'm now going to introduce a film that plays an integral role in this discussion, Frank Darabont's The Shawshank Redemption. If you haven't seen this classic, it's a grounded musing on what freedom is. Spoiler warning if you haven't seen it, but the film follows Andy Dufresne, a man stuck behind walls for a crime he never committed. He spends his days in and out dreaming of one day making it beyond the walls to Suhantaneo, a small shore on the Pacific Ocean. Remind you of anybody? However, Andy's really the opposite of Eren. He's cool, calm, and collected. Andy's got something figured out, despite his physical shackles. Like the character Red says,
he strolled, like a man in a park without a care or worry in the world. Like he had on an invisible coat that would shield him from this place.
Like I said, the opposite of Eren. There is this beautiful scene where Andy comes back from 2 weeks of solitary confinement completely unscathed. His friends are shocked and ask him how he maintained his sanity. He explains, the walls can't affect you if you don't permit them, because of something deep within that nothing in the physical world can breach. Andy is a man behind walls, but the film depicts him as free. And this free man strolling without a care is the only character in the whole movie to successfully break out of Shawshank Prison. Could it be that an internal freedom must befall the individual before external freedom can be granted? Attack on Titan is slowly moving towards this sentiment. Again, I'm not a manga reader, so I could be off, but with the progression of the show and the hints planted along the way, it just seems natural we'd arrive at this conclusion. That when disillusioned and faced with the coldest reality of all, that you will one day die, the only unrivaled truth that still matters is that you were born at all. Even Eren has seen fragments of this truth. His missives on being born into this world and being free as a result are proof. But he so easily and so quickly forgets it in the turmoil of his ideas and aspirations for what that freedom should be. Isayama has introduced a whole slew of characters who have not moved towards this realization yet, except for one. There's one character in this series that lives like Andy Dufresne, taking what life sends his way while dreaming of a warm place by the ocean. I think the perfect symbol of unbridled freedom is Armin.
I found a book my grandpa keeps hidden away. Believe it or not, it's about life on the outside.
I believe Armin will be the symbolic answer to Attack on Titan's conflict. Because if Eren is our repression, Armin is our wisdom. Eren, the Faustian self, Armin, the entire self. There's a reason his name in German descends from the word whole. Armin finds profound value in trivialities, in small fleeting moments that other characters easily glance over, whether or not there are walls around him. In many ways, Armin is like a child. Not infantile, but youthful. He sees the world in all of its brutality from the eyes of a child who that brutality has not poisoned yet. This isn't regression or ignorance, it's instead wisdom. The Christian doctrine tells us this much, quote, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." From episode 1, Armin's freedom wasn't the extermination of the Titans, it wasn't protection, it wasn't power. Eren even agrees as much.
And Armin's lost as much as I have, but he just doesn't like me. He cares about more than fighting.
And And this even strikes someone as cold as Levi. While contemplating Kenny's missive about enslavement, Armin's perspective is suddenly the answer which comes to him. Armin is the conclusion to Kenny's hypothesis, that in the face of death and in the weight of existing, the one thing that turns out to matter is simply what is. Take for another example, Mikasa and Eren debate over what was and what could be. Armin reminds them of what is.
Can we go back to how things used to be?
Some things will be the same, but some things have changed forever. And we'll make them pay for that.
There's more out there, though. The sea. Remember? There's so much beyond the walls, not just titans. Water that glows like fire, fields of ice, giant rocks that take days to climb.
Where others looked to the horizon, Armin looked down at the ground. There's a pretty clear visual justification of this. Armin is the one who picks up the seashell while Eren gazes outward. We analyzed the first episode of the first season. Now let's analyze the last episode of the third season, right next to Shawshank. Eren's eyes lay on the horizon. Of course, physical conflict is not to be rejected, but Eren remains hopelessly negligent to the fact that the thing he's been searching for is just below his feet. In his obsessive pursuit for freedom and his anguishings over his shackles, he's lost something. He even admitted to it on a rooftop in Shiganshina.
Thing is, that's been our dream since we were kids. Only I forgot it a long time ago.
Eren's so closely tethered to his idea of freedom that his microscopic obsessions prevent him from seeing the full picture, a crime that we are all perpetrators of. Here's the closing scene of Shawshank. Andy Dufresne has found that warm place, that symbolic baptism, that token of freedom. Andy's still a wanted man. The people above that body of water are presumably searching for him, but he made it to the sea, and that's damn good enough. Andy Dufresne and Eren Yeager both stand on the same ground in the same timeless place, but one is free and the other is not. Of course, I recognize I'm committing the same sin that a lot of other YouTube essayists do. I've started to riff a lot of ideas without evidence, but fortunately, Isayama shared with us some insight in the latest and final Attack on Titan guidebook that may help solidify my claims. I can't wait to walk around a not-so-fashionable town in the middle of the day in warm weather with a cup in my hand. I think that's what freedom is. There are two missives that help conclude this segment. The first is a little lengthy, but it's important to cover for the sake of this video. Here's an excerpt from a book written by the Buddhist Steve Hagen. The essence of Zen is knowing freedom. Even though we might think we're free, most of us are bound by our ideas, our beliefs, our concepts, our intellectualizations. As a result, we're imprisoned in a far more difficult and pernicious way than if we were behind steel bars. Often people approach freedom in ways that only bind them all the more. We run to freedom with an urgent desire and with a lot of notions of what freedom is, but what freedom points to cannot be gained, earned, achieved, developed, or acquired. In fact, freedom cannot even be successfully sought. This is because freedom is already ours, right from the very start. The only reason we don't realize this is that we heap chains upon ourselves, and we do it in many and varied ways. Most of us approach freedom as if it were something we need to get, but actually it's more like something to get rid of. We spend our time caught up in thought, dividing everything off, separating ourselves from reality, and then we think we lack something and have to fill that lack. Unless we realize that this is what we do, we cannot become free, simply because that kind of freedom is just an idea. And while you're caught up in that idea, you ignore or deny the clear and obvious truth of this very moment. Freedom is about acquainting ourselves on a daily basis with how quickly we're tricked, how easily we're sucked into our own ideas of reality, and how tightly we're bound up in our petty likes and dislikes, our fears and prejudices. Nevertheless, we're here. We can't help but be here. In reality, you are free. This is going on. And a conclusive missive from Lao Tzu in his work Tao Te Ching. The mark of a moderate man is freedom from his own ideas. tolerant like the sky, all-pervading like sunlight, firm like a mountain, supple like a tree in the wind. The great paradox of freedom is that one's idea of it must be sacrificed to be obtained, which is ultimately where the Christ or the rebirth allegory stems from, the same sacrificial rebirthing we saw Eren undergo in the first season. I think we've heard this idea before.
Give up on your dream and charge to your death.
Isayama's claim is that through sacrament, forfeiting every preconceived notion about what freedom should be and all of its physical baggage, and then facing your mortality, there lies an even greater reward on the other side. Of course, it's Armin that reminds us.
If you can't let it go, it's not worth holding on to.
Freedom never existed beyond the walls. It wasn't ever anywhere our characters weren't. Freedom was the field Eren woke up in. It was in the bandage Historia made out of her skirt. It was on the stairs outside of the pub, and it was on the streets of Shiganshina the day we met Eren. We're all bound in spirit by our similar archetypal struggles, cartoon characters or not, and it's the given moment that stands to hold value in the face of that realization. Because as Isayama tells us, you are alive. Like Eren says, you were born into this world. And although Eren tends to forget it, Isayama concludes that's special enough. Freedom exists in sacrifice, in suffering, and above all, it exists here and now.